The gunshot that shattered the morning stillness sent every dove from the cottonwoods along the creek, and Amelia Dalton dropped the wet laundry back into the basket, her heart hammering against her ribs as she realized the sound had come from inside her own house. She ran toward the weathered farmhouse on the outskirts of Ordway, Colorado, her boots slipping on the damp grass, and found her father collapsed on the kitchen floor, his hunting rifle still clutched in his trembling hands. It was July of 1882, and the heat already pressed down on the eastern Colorado plains like a blacksmith's hammer, but Amelia felt cold all the way through as she knelt beside him. "Papa, what happened?" She tried to take the rifle from his grip, but his fingers were locked tight around it, and his eyes were wild with something between fear and fury. "They were here," he gasped, his breathing ragged. "Two men, looking for you, said you owed them money from a debt I never heard about. I fired to scare them off, but Amelia, they said they'd be back." Amelia's blood turned to ice water in her veins. She knew exactly who those men were and what they wanted, though her father had never known the truth about what happened in Denver 6 months ago. After her mother died last year, Amelia had gone to the city desperate for work to help pay the mounting medical bills. She had taken a job at what she thought was a respectable boarding house, only to discover too late it was a front for something far worse. She had escaped before anything terrible happened, but not before the proprietor, a cruel woman named Madame Rousseau, claimed Amelia had stolen money and jewelry. It was a lie, but Madame Rousseau had connections with dangerous men, and now those men had tracked her here. "Papa, I need to tell you something." Her voice shook as she helped him into a chair. "Those men, they work for someone in Denver, someone who is lying about me, but I can't prove it. I ran from there to protect us both, but I should have told you." Her father's weathered face crumpled with confusion and pain. "What are you talking about, girl? What happened in Denver?" Before she could answer, the sound of hoofbeats thundered up the road. Amelia's heart seized as she peered through the window and saw not two men, but 4 riders approaching fast, dust rising behind them like a brown curtain. She grabbed her father's rifle and checked that it was loaded, her hand steadier than she expected. "Stay down, Papa." The riders pulled up in the yard, their horses stamping and snorting in the heat. 3 of them looked like hired guns, hard men with harder eyes, but the 4th man was different. He sat tall in his saddle, his worn Stetson pulled low against the glare, and even from a distance, Amelia could see the twin revolvers on his hips and the rifle in his saddle scabbard. But there was something in the way he held himself, something that did not match the cruelty in the other men's faces. The largest of the 3 hired guns dismounted and strode toward the house. "Amelia Dalton, we know you are in there. Come out now and this goes easy. We just need you to come back to Denver and settle your accounts." "I do not owe anyone anything," Amelia called through the door, her voice stronger than she felt. "Whatever Madame Rousseau told you is a lie. That is not for us to decide, miss. We have orders to bring you back, willing or not." The 4th rider suddenly spoke, his voice deep and carrying a tone of authority that made the other men turn. "That is enough, Dutch. The lady says she does not owe the debt. Maybe we should hear her side before we go dragging anyone anywhere." The big man named Dutch spun on him. "You were hired to track her, Finn, not to get a conscience. Do your job or get out of the way." Finn Calloway swung down from his horse in one fluid motion, and Amelia could see him clearly now through the crack in the door. He was perhaps 28 or 30, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His jaw was strong and shadowed with stubble, and his eyes were the color of slate in a storm, clear and direct. He wore the clothes of a working cowboy, his shirt faded from too many washings, his leather vest scarred from hard use, but he carried himself with quiet confidence. "I agreed to track her, and I did," Finn said calmly. "I did not agree to terrorize women and old men. There is a difference between finding someone and kidnapping them." Dutch's hand dropped toward his gun, but Finn was faster. He did not draw, but his hand rested on his revolver with such casual readiness that Dutch froze. The tension stretched out like wire pulled too tight, and Amelia realized she was holding her breath. "You are making a mistake, Calloway," Dutch growled. "Madame Rousseau pays well, and she does not forget betrayal. Then I suppose she will have to add me to her list of disappointments." Finn's voice was mild, but there was steel underneath it. "You boys can ride back to Denver and tell her the trail went cold. I will stay here and make sure Miss Dalton and her father are not bothered again." The three hired guns exchanged looks, weighing their options. Finally, Dutch spat in the dust and climbed back onto his horse. "You are a fool, Calloway, but it is your funeral. We will tell Madam you turned traitor. She will send someone else, someone who is not as soft. I will be waiting." The three men wheeled their horses and galloped away, leaving Finn standing alone in the yard. Amelia watched him through the window, her rifle still ready, unsure whether to trust this stranger who had just thrown away his job to defend her. He made no move toward the house, just stood there in the heat, his horse's reins loose in his hand. Finally, her father spoke from his chair. "I think you better invite him in, daughter. Man like that deserves at least a drink of water for what he just did." Amelia hesitated, then slowly opened the door. Finn turned to face her, and she saw his eyes widen slightly as he got his first clear look at her. She knew she was not dressed for company, her dark hair falling loose from its pins, her simple calico dress dusty from housework, but something in his expression made her feel suddenly, intensely aware of herself. "Why did you do that?" she asked, still holding the rifle, though it was pointed at the ground now. "You do not know me. You do not know if I am guilty or innocent." Finn removed his hat, and she could see his face fully now. There was a scar along his left temple, old and faded, and lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting into too many sunsets. "No, madam, I do not know the truth of it, but I know men like Dutch, and I know Madame Rousseau's reputation. Whatever happened in Denver, I am willing to bet my life you got the short end of that deal. Besides, I have been tracking people for 5 years, and I have learned to read more than just signs in the dirt. I read people too. And everything about you says you are running from an injustice, not from justice itself." Amelia felt something crack inside her chest, some wall she had built to keep herself safe. No one had believed her in Denver. No one had stood up for her. And here was this stranger, this cowboy who could have earned good money by doing what those men wanted, and he had chosen to defend her instead. "Come inside," she said quietly. "It is too hot to stand in the sun, and you are right. You deserve that water and an explanation." Finn tied his horse to the porch rail and followed her into the modest house. It was clean but sparse, the furniture worn but well cared for. Amelia's father sat at the kitchen table, his rifle now leaning against the wall, and he studied Finn with the sharp eyes of a man who had lived long enough to know character when he saw it. "Name is Thomas Dalton," her father said, extending his hand. "This is my daughter, Amelia. I reckon we owe you thanks for what you did out there." Finn shook his hand firmly. "Finn Calloway, sir, and you do not owe me anything. I just did what was right." Amelia poured water from the pitcher into a clean glass and set it in front of Finn, then took a chair across from him. She could feel his eyes on her, not in the way men sometimes looked at women like they were objects to be assessed, but with genuine interest and concern. It made her feel both safer and more vulnerable at the same time. I suppose you want to know what happened in Denver, she said, her fingers twisting together in her lap. Only if you want to tell me, Finn replied, drinking the water slowly. But it might help me understand what kind of trouble is heading your way. So Amelia told him everything. She told him about her mother's long illness, the debts that piled up from doctors and medicine, her desperation to help. She told him about the advertisement for a housekeeper position at a fine boarding house, about arriving in Denver full of hope and finding something very different. She told him about discovering what Madame Rousseau really did in those upstairs rooms, about refusing to participate, about trying to leave. She told me I owed her for the train ticket she advanced me, and for room and board, Amelia said, her voice tight with remembered fear. She said I had to work it off, and when I said no, she claimed I had stolen jewelry and money from her private safe. She threatened to have me arrested if I did not stay and work. So I ran. I took the next train out of Denver with just the clothes on my back and came home. Her father's face had gone pale during her story. Why did you not tell me this before? Because I was ashamed, Amelia whispered. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I felt foolish for not seeing the trap before I walked into it, and I did not want you to worry. Finn set down his empty glass with careful deliberation. Madame Rousseau has been running that operation for years. The law in Denver looks the other way because she pays them to. She uses that theft story on girls all the time, anyone who tries to escape. The debt is never real, but it does not matter because she has the sheriff in her pocket. How do you know all this? Amelia asked. Because I used to be a lawman myself, over in Pueblo. I have seen how corruption works, how people like her use the law as a weapon against innocent people. It is part of why I stopped wearing a badge. There was old pain in his voice, and Amelia wondered what had happened to make him give up that life. So what do we do now? Her father asked. Those men will send word back and more will come. I am too old to fight off hired guns, and I will not put my daughter at risk. Finn leaned back in his chair, his mind clearly working through possibilities. They will come back. You are right about that, but it will take them a few days to get to Denver and for Madame Rousseau to send new men. That gives us time. Time for what? Amelia asked. Finn looked at her, and something in his gray eyes made her pulse quicken. Time for you to trust me. I know we just met, and I know I have given you no reason to believe in me except for what happened out there. But I think I can help you, if you are willing to let me try. How? There is a territorial judge named Clarence Morrison who rides circuit through these parts. He is in Pueblo right now, but he is due in La Junta next week. He is one of the few honest men left in Colorado territory, and he has no love for Madame Rousseau or her kind. If I can get you to La Junta safely, and we can tell your story to Judge Morrison, he can issue a writ that will protect you from these false charges. It won't shut down Madame Rousseau's operation, but it will mean she cannot use the law to come after you anymore. Amelia's father frowned. La Junta is 80 miles south of here. That is rough country, and if those men come back before you get there, they will run you down on the open plains. Not if we do not take the main roads, Finn said. I know this territory better than most. There are trails and creek beds, places where horses can move fast but trackers have a hard time following. I can get her there safely, Mr. Dalton. I give you my word. Your word is well and good, son, but I just met you today. How do I know you are not planning to take her to Denver yourself and collect whatever reward Madame Rousseau is offering? It was a fair question, and Finn did not flinch from it. You do not know that, sir. All I can tell you is that I have never betrayed someone who trusted me, and I am not about to start now. But I understand if you cannot take that chance. It is your daughter we are talking about. Amelia looked between the two men, her father protective and worried, this stranger offering help at great risk to himself. She thought about those 3 hired guns and the ones who would surely follow. She thought about spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for Madame Rousseau's men to drag her back to Denver. She thought about her father, already weak from age and today's shock, trying to defend their home against killers. And she thought about Finn Calloway standing in the yard, putting himself between her and danger without even knowing her name. "I will go with you," she said quietly. "Papa, I know it is a risk, but it is a bigger risk to stay here. If Mr. Calloway thinks Judge Morrison can help, then I have to try." Her father's jaw worked, and she could see him fighting between his protective instincts and his practical understanding of their situation. Finally, he nodded slowly. "If you are going to do this, you leave tonight. Do not wait for morning. Pack light and ride fast." Finn stood up. "I will need a few hours to prepare. I have supplies in my saddlebags, but we will need more water and food for a journey like this. Is there a general store in Ordway?" "There is," Thomas said. "But if you go in there and start buying trail supplies, people will notice. Word travels fast in a small town. Then I will ride to the next town over. There is a trading post in Crowley about 10 miles east. I can be back by sunset." Finn looked at Amelia. "Can you be ready to leave by dark?" "Yes," she said, though her heart was racing at how fast everything was moving. This morning she had been hanging laundry, and now she was preparing to flee across the Colorado plains with a man she had known for less than an hour. Finn seemed to read the fear in her eyes because his expression softened. "I know this is happening fast, Miss Dalton, and I know you have no reason to trust me beyond what you have seen today. But I promise you, I will get you to La Junta safely, and I will not let Madame Rousseau's men take you. You have my word on that." "Why are you doing this?" Amelia asked, needing to understand. "You could have just ridden away with those men. You could have stayed out of this entirely. Why risk yourself for someone you do not even know?" Finn was quiet for a moment, his hat turning slowly in his hands. "Because 5 years ago, I failed to protect someone who needed help. I was a deputy in Pueblo, and there was a young woman who came to me saying her employer was forcing her to work against her will, threatening her family if she tried to leave. I told her to file a formal complaint, to go through the proper channels. 3 days later, she was found dead in an alley. They said it was an accident, but I knew better. I knew, and I had done nothing to stop it because I was too concerned with following the rules." His voice was rough with old guilt, and Amelia felt her throat tighten with sympathy. "That was not your fault." "Maybe not entirely, but I could have done more. I could have helped her instead of hiding behind procedure. I quit the force the next day and swore I would never ignore someone in need again, even if it meant breaking the rules." He looked up at her, and his eyes were clear and honest. "So that is why I am doing this, Miss Dalton, because you needed help, and I will not make the same mistake twice." Amelia felt something shift inside her, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the summer heat. This man, this stranger, carried scars she could not see, wounds that had shaped him into someone who would stand against hired guns to defend a woman he had never met. There was honor in him, real and deep, and she found herself wanting to trust him with a fierceness that surprised her. "Thank you," she said softly. "And please call me Amelia. If we are going to be riding across the plains together, we might as well use first names." A slow smile spread across Finn's face, transforming it from serious to something warmer, more approachable. "Then you should call me Finn. Mr. Calloway makes me sound like my father, and he was a far better man than I will ever be." He settled his hat back on his head and moved toward the door. "I will be back by sunset. Be ready to ride and wear something practical. We will be covering rough ground." After he left, Amelia stood at the window watching him mount his horse and ride east toward Crowley, his figure growing smaller against the vast backdrop of the Colorado plains. Her father came to stand beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. "That is a good man," Thomas said quietly. "Troubled maybe, carrying some weight on his shoulders, but good through and through. I think you will be safe with him." "I think so too," Amelia whispered, though safe was not quite the right word for what she was feeling. She felt something much more complicated than that, something that made her pulse race and her stomach flutter with nervous anticipation. She spent the afternoon packing a small bag with practical clothes, her mother's silver locket, and a few precious items she could not bear to leave behind. Her father moved through the house restlessly, checking the windows, cleaning his rifle, making sure the doors were secure. They both knew that leaving him alone here was a risk, but he insisted he would be fine. "I will tell anyone who asks that you went to stay with your aunt in Kansas City," he said. "By the time those men come back, the trail will be cold, and they will have no reason to bother an old man." Amelia was not entirely convinced, but she knew he was right that her being gone would make him safer, not less so. She hugged him tightly, breathing in the familiar smell of tobacco and soap that had been her father for as long as she could remember. "I will send word when I can," she promised. "And when this is over, when Judge Morrison has settled things, I will come home." "I know you will, daughter. But in the meantime, you listen to Finn Calloway. He knows what he is doing, and more importantly, he cares about keeping you safe. That counts for a lot in this world." The sun was painting the western sky in shades of orange and crimson when Finn returned, his saddlebags bulging with supplies. He had also brought a second horse, a sturdy bay mare with intelligent eyes and a calm disposition. "I figured you would need your own mount," he explained as he dismounted. "I traded for her in Crowley. Her name is Sadie, and she has good endurance. She will serve you well on the trail." Amelia approached the mare carefully, letting her smell her hand before stroking her neck. Sadie nickered softly, and Amelia felt a rush of gratitude for Finn's thoughtfulness. She was a capable rider, having grown up on this farm, but she had worried about sharing a horse with a man she barely knew. "She is beautiful," Amelia said. "How much do I owe you for her?" Finn waved the question away. "Consider it part of my payment for failing to deliver you to Madame Rousseau. I suspect there was a bounty I will not be collecting, so this evens things out." They loaded her small bag onto Sadie, and Finn spent a few minutes checking the mare's tack and adjusting the stirrups to fit Amelia's shorter legs. The sun was sinking fast now, and the evening shadows stretched long across the dusty yard. Thomas came out to see them off, his face drawn with worry but also with resignation. "You take care of my girl," he said to Finn, gripping his hand hard. "With my life, sir," Finn replied, and there was no drama in his voice, just simple truth. Amelia hugged her father one more time, fighting back tears. "I love you, Papa. Stay safe." "I love you too, daughter. Now go before it gets full dark." She mounted Sadie, settling into the saddle with practiced ease, and followed Finn out of the yard. They headed south initially, following the main road, but after a mile, Finn turned west onto a barely visible trail that led toward Big Sandy Creek. The land here was open prairie, rolling gently under the enormous sky, and Amelia could smell the dry grass and dust, the faint scent of water from the distant creek. They rode in silence for a while, letting the horses find their rhythm. The last light was fading from the sky, and stars were beginning to appear overhead, more stars than Amelia had ever seen, spread out like diamond dust across black velvet. The moon was nearly full, bright enough to cast shadows, and it gave Finn's face a carved, almost otherworldly quality as he rode ahead of her. "We will follow the creek south for about 15 miles, he said, turning in his saddle to look back at her. "Then we will cut across to the Purgatoire River and follow that toward La Junta. It is rough country, but it will keep us away from the main roads where Madame Rousseau's men would look first." "How long will it take?" Amelia asked. 3 days if we push hard, maybe 4 if we need to lay low and avoid trouble. There are a few ranches along the way where we can get fresh water, and I know some places we can camp safely. Amelia nodded, trusting his judgment. The night air was cooling rapidly after the heat of the day, and she was glad she had worn her heavy riding skirt and brought a shawl. They rode for hours, the only sounds the steady clop of hooves, the creak of leather, and the occasional call of a night bird. It should have been frightening, riding across the dark plains with a stranger, but somehow Amelia felt safer than she had in months. Maybe it was the way Finn kept checking over his shoulder to make sure she was still with him, or the confident way he navigated the dark landscape like he could read it even without light. Maybe it was simply that for the first time since leaving Denver, she was not facing this alone. Whatever the reason, she found herself relaxing into the ride, letting Sadie follow Finn's horse through the darkness. They reached Big Sandy Creek around midnight, and Finn led them down into the creek bed where the sand was damp and the cottonwood trees grew thick. He dismounted and helped Amelia down, his hands strong and steady on her waist, and she felt a jolt of awareness at the contact. In the moonlight, he was all angles and shadows, his eyes dark and unreadable. "We will rest here for a few hours," he said, stepping back quickly as if he too had felt that spark. "Let the horses drink and graze. We should sleep while we can because tomorrow will be a long day." He unsaddled both horses with efficient movements, then spread a blanket on the sand under the trees. Amelia stood awkwardly, unsure of the protocol for camping with a man who was essentially a stranger, but Finn seemed to sense her discomfort. "You take the blanket," he said. "I will keep watch for a while and then I will sleep on my saddle. I have done it 100 times before." "That hardly seems fair," Amelia protested. "You need rest as much as I do. I am used to rough sleeping, and besides, I want to make sure no one followed us from Ordway." His tone was gentle but firm, leaving no room for argument. Amelia lay down on the blanket, her bag as a pillow, and pulled her shawl around her shoulders. Above her, the cottonwood leaves whispered in the slight breeze, and she could hear the gentle sound of the creek flowing nearby. Finn sat with his back against a tree trunk, his rifle across his knees, a dark silhouette against the star-filled sky. "Finn," she said quietly. "Yes, thank you for this, for everything. I know I said it before, but I mean it. You did not have to help me, and you are risking a lot by going against Madame Rousseau." She heard him shift in the darkness. "Get some rest, Amelia. We have a long way to go still." But there was warmth in his voice, and she smiled into the darkness before exhaustion finally pulled her down into sleep. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of birds singing in the trees. The sky was just beginning to lighten in the east, a band of pale gold on the horizon, and Finn was crouched by a small fire, heating water in a battered tin pot. He looked up when she stirred and gave her a tired smile. "Morning. I hope you do not mind, but I made coffee. We need to get moving soon, but I figured we could use the warmth." Amelia sat up, feeling stiff from sleeping on the ground but more rested than she had expected. She accepted the cup of coffee Finn poured for her, strong and black and almost scalding, and sipped it gratefully. They shared some jerky and hardtack for breakfast, not talking much, both focused on the day ahead. Finn doused the fire and saddled the horses while Amelia folded the blanket and packed away their few supplies. The sun was just cresting the horizon when they mounted and continued south along the creek bed, the morning light turning the world golden and new. They rode hard all day, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and eat a quick meal. The landscape changed gradually as they traveled, the flat plains giving way to more rolling hills, the grass turning from green to brown in the summer heat. Amelia's thighs and back began to ache from so many hours in the saddle, but she did not complain. She could see the tension in Finn's shoulders, the way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon, and she knew he was watching for pursuit. By late afternoon, they had reached a junction where Big Sandy Creek met another, smaller waterway. Finn pulled up and studied the landscape carefully, his hand shading his eyes against the slanting sun. "We are going to cut west here," he said. "There is a ranch about 5 miles that way, owned by a man named Martinez. He is a friend, or at least someone who owes me a favor. We can get fresh water there and maybe a hot meal." They followed a faint trail through the hills, and as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Amelia saw buildings ahead. A low adobe house, a barn, corrals with horses and cattle. Dogs started barking as they approached, and a man stepped out of the house, a rifle in his hands. Finn raised his hand in greeting. "Easy, Carlos. It is Finn Calloway." The man's stern expression broke into a wide smile, and he lowered the rifle. "Finn, what brings you out this way? And who is your companion?" They dismounted in the yard, and Finn made introductions. Carlos Martinez was perhaps 40, with a weathered face and kind eyes, and his wife Rosa appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. When Finn explained their situation in broad terms, not mentioning Madame Rousseau by name, but making it clear that Amelia was fleeing from an injustice, the Martinez family immediately offered their hospitality. "You will stay for supper," Rosa insisted, in a tone that suggested refusal was not an option. "And you can sleep in the barn tonight. It is not much, but it is safer than the open plains." Over a meal of beans and cornbread and roasted chicken, Finn and Carlos talked about mutual acquaintances and changes in the territory. Amelia found herself relaxing in the warm, family atmosphere of the Martinez home. Rosa asked her gentle questions about her life in Ordway, and Amelia found herself opening up more than she had expected, talking about her mother's death, her father's farm, her hopes and fears. After supper, Carlos took Finn aside for a private conversation while Rosa showed Amelia where they could sleep in the barn. The barn was clean and sweet-smelling with fresh hay, and Rosa had brought out blankets and even a pillow. "Finn is a good man," Rosa said as she helped Amelia make up a sleeping area in one of the empty stalls. "My husband told me how he helped us 3 years ago when bandits were raiding the ranches in this area. He tracked them down and made sure they faced justice. He did not ask for payment, just did it because it was right. He seems to have a habit of helping people," Amelia said softly. Rosa smiled knowingly. "Yes, and he has a good heart, though he has been alone too long. Since his wife died, he has not let anyone close." Amelia's head snapped up. "He was married, years ago when he was very young. She died of fever, I think, before they had even been married a full year. He does not talk about it much, but Carlos says it changed him, made him harder in some ways but also more careful with people's lives. He knows what it is to lose someone you love." This new information settled over Amelia like a weight. She had wondered about the sadness she sometimes glimpsed in Finn's eyes, the sense that he carried old wounds. Now she understood a little better. He had loved and lost, and he had spent the years since trying to make up for the people he could not save. When Rosa left, Amelia sat on the blankets, her mind churning with thoughts. She heard footsteps and looked up to see Finn entering the barn, carrying his saddle and bedroll. He paused when he saw her. "I will sleep on the other side of the barn," he said. "Carlos said there is another empty stall over there. I just wanted to make sure you were settled for the night." "Finn, wait." Amelia stood up, brushing hay from her skirt. "Rosa told me about your wife. I am sorry." "I did not know." His expression closed off slightly, becoming more guarded. "It was a long time ago. But it still matters," Amelia said gently. "Loss like that does not just disappear." Finn set down his saddle and turned to face her fully. In the dim light of the barn, with the last rays of sunset slanting through the gaps in the walls, he looked tired and young and vulnerable all at once. "No, it does not disappear, but you learn to carry it. You learn to keep moving forward because stopping means letting the grief win." "Is that why you help people? To keep moving forward?" He considered the question seriously. "Maybe partly, but also because I know what it is like to feel helpless, to watch something terrible happen and not be able to stop it. If I can spare someone else that feeling, even just once, then maybe all the pain means something." Amelia felt her heart squeeze with sympathy and something deeper, something warmer and more complicated. She took a step toward him, closing the distance between them. "You are a better man than you give yourself credit for, Finn Calloway." He looked down at her, and she saw something flicker in his eyes, something heated and hungry that made her breath catch. For a long moment they stood there, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell the scent of leather and horse and sun-warmed skin that clung to him. Then Finn stepped back, breaking the spell. "We should get some sleep. Tomorrow we cross into rougher country, and I want to make good time." Amelia nodded, feeling both relieved and disappointed. She watched him retreat to the other side of the barn, and she lay down on her blankets with her heart still racing. She was falling for him, she realized with a start. This man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer, who risked everything to keep her safe, who carried his own scars with quiet dignity. She was falling for him, and she had no idea if he felt the same way, or if she was just another person he was trying to save. Sleep came slowly that night, and when it did, her dreams were filled with gray eyes and gentle hands, and the possibility of something she had never expected to find while running for her life. They left the Martinez ranch before dawn the next morning, their saddlebags restocked with food, and their canteens filled with fresh water. Carlos had given Finn some information about reported activity in the area, including rumors of strangers asking questions in the towns to the north. It confirmed what they both suspected. Madame Rousseau's men were still looking for Amelia. "We need to move fast and stay out of sight," Finn said as they rode south through the pre-dawn darkness. "The Purgatoire River is about 20 miles from here. Once we reach it, we can follow it most of the way to La Junta. But the country between here and there is open, and we will be exposed." They pushed the horses hard, crossing the empty plains at a steady canter, eating up the miles. The sun rose hot and fierce, and by mid-morning the heat was oppressive, shimmering in waves off the dry earth. Amelia tied her handkerchief around her neck to keep the sun off, and she could feel sweat trickling down her back under her clothes. Around noon, Finn called a halt near a rocky outcropping that provided some meager shade. They dismounted and let the horses rest while they shared water and dried fruit. Amelia could see the strain in Finn's face, the constant vigilance that never quite let him relax. "You think they are close?" she asked. "I do not know," he admitted, "but I am not taking chances. Carlos said the men asking questions were headed toward Ordway, which means they are behind us, but probably not by much. If they are good trackers, they might figure out we are heading for La Junta and try to cut us off." "What will we do if they catch up?" Finn's jaw tightened. We will deal with it if it happens, but my priority is getting you to Judge Morrison safely. Everything else is secondary." They remounted and continued south, the landscape gradually changing as they descended from the high plains toward the river valley. The Purgatoire River, when they finally reached it in late afternoon, was a welcome sight. A ribbon of brown water cutting through the dry land, lined with cottonwoods and willows that provided blessed shade. Finn led them into the river bottom, and they followed the water south, moving at a slower pace now to save the horses' strength. The shade and the sound of flowing water were a relief after hours under the brutal sun, and Amelia felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. They made camp that night in a sheltered bend of the river, hidden from the main trail by thick brush. Finn built a small fire to heat beans and coffee, but he kept it low and shielded, not wanting the light to be visible from a distance. They ate in companionable silence, both too tired for much conversation. After the meal, Amelia walked down to the river to wash her face and hands in the cool water. The moon was rising, nearly full and bright, and it turned the flowing water to liquid silver. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Finn approaching, his hat in his hands. "I wanted to make sure you were all right," he said. "Today was hard riding." "I am tougher than I look," Amelia replied with a small smile. "My father made sure I could handle a horse and a hard day's work." "I can see that." Finn sat down on a rock near the water's edge, and after a moment's hesitation, Amelia joined him. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds. The river, the rustling leaves, the distant call of a coyote. "Can I ask you something?" Amelia said finally, "Of course. What will you do after we reach La Junta? After Judge Morrison helps me, what happens to you?" Finn was quiet for a long moment. "I had not thought that far ahead, honestly. I suppose I will go back to what I was doing before, tracking, scouting, whatever work comes my way." "That sounds lonely." "It is," he admitted, "but it is what I know. And after you have lost people you care about, sometimes keeping moving feels safer than staying still." Amelia turned to look at him, this man who had become so important to her in just a few days. Maybe staying still is not about being safe. Maybe it is about being brave enough to let people in, even when you know it might hurt. Finn met her eyes, and in the moonlight, she could see the conflict in his face, the war between his instinct to protect himself and something else, something that wanted to reach for what she was offering. "Amelia, you barely know me. A few days ago, I was tracking you for a woman who wanted to drag you back to Denver. I am not a good bet for anyone." "I think you are wrong about that," Amelia said softly. "I think you are exactly the kind of man worth taking a chance on. You are honorable and brave and kind, and you carry your scars with grace. That means something, Finn. That means everything." He reached out slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair back from her face. His fingers were rough and warm against her skin, and Amelia felt electricity race through her at the gentle touch. "You are making this very difficult," he said, his voice rough. "Making what difficult?" "Keeping my distance. Remembering that I am supposed to be protecting you, not falling for you." Amelia's heart stuttered in her chest. "And if I said I was falling for you too, what would you say then?" Finn's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb stroking along her jaw with infinite tenderness. "I would say you are making a terrible mistake, but I am selfish enough to be glad for it anyway." He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to stop him, but Amelia did not want to stop. She wanted this, wanted him, with a fierceness that surprised her. When his lips met hers, it was gentle at first, questioning, and she answered by leaning into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest where she could feel his heart hammering as hard as her own. The kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and real. All the tension and fear and hope of the past few days pouring into that single moment of connection. Finn's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Amelia felt safe and desired and alive in a way she had never experienced before. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Finn rested his forehead against hers. "We should not be doing this," he whispered, but he made no move to let her go. "Probably not," Amelia agreed, "but I do not want to stop." "Neither do I." He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise rather than a question. "But we need to be smart. We are not safe yet, and I cannot let my feelings for you cloud my judgment." "I know." Amelia pulled back reluctantly, already missing the warmth of his embrace. "But when this is over, when we reach La Junta and Judge Morrison helps me, then we can figure out what this is between us." "Is that a promise?" "It is if you want it to be." Finn smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger, less burdened. "Then I want it to be. And I promise you, Amelia Dalton, I will get you to La Junta safely, and then we will have all the time in the world to figure this out." They walked back to camp hand in hand, and though they slept on opposite sides of the fire that night, Amelia felt the invisible thread connecting them, stronger than fear or danger or common sense. She fell asleep with a smile on her face and hope in her heart for the first time in a very long while. The next day dawned clear and hot, and they were on the trail before the sun cleared the eastern horizon. Finn set a punishing pace, clearly anxious to cover as much ground as possible, and Amelia matched him mile for mile. The Purgatoire River led them through increasingly rugged country, the flat plains giving way to rocky bluffs and scattered pine trees as they approached the foothills of the distant mountains. Around mid-afternoon, Finn suddenly pulled up, his hand raised in a signal to stop. Amelia reined in Sadie, her heart leaping into her throat at the tension in his posture. He was staring at something ahead, his whole body alert. "What is it?" she whispered. "Riders," Finn said quietly. "3 of them, maybe half a mile ahead on the trail. Could be innocent travelers, or it could be trouble." He led them off the main path into a dense thicket of willows, and they dismounted, holding the horses' heads to keep them quiet. Through the screen of branches, Amelia could see 3 men on horseback approaching along the river trail. As they got closer, her blood turned to ice. It was Dutch and the 2 men who had been with him at the farm. Finn's hand moved to his revolver, but he did not draw it, not yet. They watched in tense silence as the 3 riders passed within 50 feet of their hiding place. Dutch was talking in a loud, complaining voice about the heat and the endless searching, and one of his companions pointed south along the trail. "They probably made for La Junta," the man was saying. "Only place within 100 miles where they could find help. We should push on and see if we can cut them off before they reach town. Madame Rousseau is paying double if we bring the girl back before the end of the week," Dutch said. "So we keep looking until we find her, and we do not stop for anything." The voices faded as the riders continued south, and Finn waited several long minutes before relaxing his grip on his gun. He turned to Amelia, his face grim. "They are ahead of us now, between us and La Junta. We cannot follow the river anymore. It is too dangerous. What do we do?" Amelia asked, fighting down panic. Finn thought for a moment, his mind clearly racing through options. "There is another route, rougher and longer, but it might work. We can cut west into the hills and circle around La Junta, come in from the south instead of the north. It will add a day to our journey, but it will keep us away from those men." "Then that is what we do," Amelia said firmly. "I trust you, Finn. Whatever you think is best." He looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You asked me once why I was doing this. Why I was risking so much to help you. The truth is, It started as the right thing to do, a way to make up for past failures. But it is not about that anymore, Amelia. Somewhere along this trail it became about you. About keeping you safe, not because I owe the world something, but because I cannot imagine anything happening to you. Because the thought of you in danger makes me want to tear the world apart with my bare hands. Amelia felt tears prick her eyes at the raw honesty in his words. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. I know, I feel it too. This connection between us, it is not just about gratitude or circumstance. It is real, Finn. Whatever happens, I need you to know that. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. We are going to get through this. I promise you that. And when we do, I am going to court you properly, the way you deserve. I am going to take you to church socials and buy you ribbons and ask your father's permission to call on you. I am going to do this right. Despite the fear and the danger, Amelia laughed. I will hold you to that, Cowboy. They mounted up and turned west, leaving the river behind and heading into the broken hill country that rose toward the distant Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The terrain was rougher here, full of rocky draws and steep-sided gullies, but Finn navigated it with the confidence of someone who knew this land intimately. They rode hard through the afternoon and into the evening, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Dutch's men. As the sun set, painting the western sky in shades of orange and purple, they made camp in a secluded canyon where a spring bubbled up from the rocks to form a small pool of clear water. It was a beautiful spot, hidden and safe, and Amelia felt some of the tension drain from her shoulders as they unsaddled the horses and let them drink. Finn built a fire in a ring of stones, positioning it so the smoke would disperse among the rocks rather than rising in a visible column. They ate jerky and hardtack and the last of Rosa Martinez's cornbread, and they shared coffee that tasted like heaven after the long, hot day. After the meal, Amelia sat on a flat rock near the spring, running her fingers through the cool water. Finn joined her, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched, a casual intimacy that felt both new and completely natural. The stars were coming out overhead, countless and brilliant in the clear air, and the night was peaceful except for the quiet sounds of the horses grazing nearby. Tell me about your wife, Amelia said softly, if it is not too painful. Finn was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he began to speak, his voice low and measured. Her name was Sarah. We grew up in the same town in Kansas, knew each other our whole lives. I loved her from the time I was 14 years old, and when we were both 18, we got married. It was the happiest day of my life. He paused, and Amelia waited, letting him take his time. We moved to Colorado together, full of plans and dreams. I took a job as a deputy in Pueblo, and she started making our little house into a home. We had 6 months together, 6 perfect months. And then the fever came through town. I watched her get sick, watched her fade away, and there was nothing I could do. She died holding my hand, asking me to remember the good times and not be sad. His voice broke slightly on the last words, and Amelia reached for his hand, holding it tightly. I am so sorry, Finn. I tried to honor her wishes, tried not to be sad, but for years, all I felt was empty. I threw myself into work, into tracking and helping people, anything to fill the void. And I told myself I would never love like that again, because I could not survive losing someone else. He turned to look at Amelia, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. But then you happened. You with your courage and your strength and your determination to fight for what is right. You walked into my life. And suddenly that emptiness did not feel so vast anymore. Suddenly, I could imagine a future that was not just about moving forward but about actually living again. Amelia felt her own tears spilling over. "I did not come looking for this for you. I was just trying to survive, to escape from a terrible situation. But you gave me more than safety, Finn. You gave me hope. You showed me what it means to be valued and protected and cared for. And I fell in love with you somewhere between Ordway and here. Fell so hard I can barely breathe when I think about what my life would be like if I had never met you." Finn cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "I love you, Amelia Dalton. I know it is fast. I know we have barely had time to know each other, but I love you with everything I am. And if you will have me, I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy." "Yes," Amelia whispered. "Yes to all of it. I love you too, Finn Calloway, and I want that future with you more than I have ever wanted anything." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring all his love and hope and longing into that kiss. Amelia responded with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck, holding him close like she would never let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and trembling, Finn rested his forehead against hers. "When we get to La Junta, when Judge Morrison settles this business with Madame Rousseau, I am going to ask your father for your hand properly," he said. "And then I am going to marry you, Amelia, if you will have me." "I will have you," she promised. "Today, tomorrow, always." They spent the night wrapped in each other's arms by the fire, not sleeping much, just talking and kissing and making plans for a future that had seemed impossible just days before. Amelia felt like she was living in a dream, a beautiful dream where the man she loved held her close and whispered promises against her hair, where danger felt distant and love felt real and solid and permanent. But morning came too soon, bringing with it the reminder that they were not safe yet, that Madame Rousseau's men were still hunting them. They packed up camp with practiced efficiency, both sober and focused, knowing that the next day or two would determine whether they reached La Junta safely or whether all their hopes would come to nothing. They rode west through the hills all that day, navigating steep trails and rocky canyons. It was slow going, but Finn seemed confident in his route, and Amelia trusted him completely. By late afternoon, they crested a ridge and looked down into a broad valley, and in the distance, Amelia could see buildings and a church steeple. "La Junta," Finn said, pointing. "We made it, Amelia. We are almost there." Relief flooded through her, so intense it made her dizzy. They had outrun Dutch and his men, had navigated hundreds of miles of dangerous territory, and they were finally safe. But Finn's expression was cautious as he studied the town below. "We cannot just ride in during daylight," he said. "Those men might have doubled back, might have people watching the roads. We will wait until dark and slip in quietly. I know where Judge Morrison stays when he is in town, a boarding house on the south side. We will go straight there." So they made camp one last time in a grove of pinyon pines overlooking the valley, and they waited for sunset. Amelia was too nervous to eat, her stomach in knots, but Finn made her drink water and nibble on some jerky, insisting she keep her strength up. As the sun sank toward the western horizon, Finn checked his revolvers and his rifle, making sure everything was loaded and ready. Amelia watched him, this man who had become her whole world in such a short time, and she felt a surge of love so powerful it took her breath away. "Finn." He looked up from checking his guns. "Yes. No matter what happens tonight, I want you to know I do not regret any of this. Running with you, falling in love with you, all of it. You gave me the best days of my life." Finn crossed to her in 3 quick strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Nothing is going to happen," he said fiercely. "We are going to walk into that town, we are going to see Judge Morrison, and we are going to end this. And then we are going to have a lifetime together, Amelia. I promise you that." She buried her face against his chest, breathing in the scent of him, trying to memorize everything about this moment. The strength of his arms, the steady beat of his heart, the absolute certainty in his voice. "I believe you," she whispered. "I trust you, Finn. One more time, I trust you." They waited until full darkness had fallen, and then they mounted up and rode slowly down from the hills toward La Junta. The town was small but bustling, its streets lit with lanterns, the sound of piano music and laughter spilling from the saloons. Finn led them through the back streets, avoiding the main thoroughfares, and Amelia's heart pounded so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. They were almost to the boarding house when a voice rang out behind them. "Well, well, I thought that might be you, Calloway." Finn went rigid in his saddle. Slowly, they both turned to see Dutch standing in the middle of the street, his hand hovering over his gun. The other two hired men emerged from the shadows on either side, effectively boxing them in. "You led us on quite a chase," Dutch said, his voice dripping with mockery. "But we figured you would head here eventually. Madame Rousseau does not hire stupid men, Calloway. You should know that." "Let her go, Dutch," Finn said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You have no quarrel with her. This is between you and me now." Dutch laughed. "Oh, but we do have a quarrel with her. She owes Madame Rousseau money, and we have been hired to collect." "You can walk away right now, Calloway, and we will forget you ever crossed us. Just leave the girl and ride out." "That is not going to happen." Finn dismounted slowly, his hands held away from his guns, but Amelia could see the coiled tension in his body, the readiness to move in an instant. "Then I suppose we do this the hard way." Dutch's hand dropped toward his revolver. Everything happened in a blur. Finn moved with blinding speed, his gun clearing leather before Dutch could even finish his draw. The crack of gunfire split the night, and Dutch stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder. The other two men went for their guns, but Finn was already moving, firing twice more with deadly accuracy. One man went down immediately, and the other dove for cover behind a water trough. Finn grabbed Amelia and pulled her from her horse, shielding her body with his own as he dragged her toward the shelter of a nearby building. Bullets whizzed past them, splintering wood and kicking up dirt, and Amelia felt terror like she had never known. But Finn was steady as a rock, returning fire with calm precision, his body positioned to protect her from any threat. The third gunman fired again, and Amelia heard Finn grunt with pain. She looked down and saw blood spreading across his left arm, but he did not stop, did not falter. "Stay down," he commanded, and then he was moving again, circling around to flank the remaining gunmen. There was another exchange of shots and then silence. Finn emerged from the darkness, his face grim but alive, whole. Dutch was on the ground, writhing in pain but alive. One of his companions was not moving, and the third had his hands raised in surrender, his gun lying in the dirt. People were pouring out of the buildings now, drawn by the gunfire, and among them was a tall, distinguished-looking man with silver hair and a star pinned to his vest. "What in blazes is going on here?" he demanded. Finn holstered his gun and helped Amelia to her feet. "Sheriff, my name is Finn Calloway, and this is Miss Amelia Dalton. These men work for Madame Rousseau in Denver, and they have been trying to force Miss Dalton back there on false charges of theft. We came to La Junta to see Judge Morrison and clear her name." The sheriff looked at the carnage in the street, then at Finn and Amelia, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Judge Morrison is at the boarding house right now. Maybe you better come with me and explain this whole mess properly." They followed the sheriff through the gathering crowd, Amelia clinging to Finn's uninjured arm, shaking with reaction. He leaned down to whisper in her ear. "It is over, sweetheart. You are safe now. I promised I would get you here, and I did." Judge Morrison turned out to be a stern-faced man in his 60s with piercing blue eyes and an air of uncompromising integrity. He listened to their story in the parlor of the boarding house while a doctor tended to Finn's arm, which thankfully was only grazed by a bullet, not seriously wounded. When they finished, Judge Morrison sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "I am familiar with Madame Rousseau's operation, and I am familiar with her tactics. She has used this false theft claim before to trap young women. The problem is proving it, as she has the Denver authorities in her pocket. But you can help, can you not?" Amelia asked, hearing the desperation in her own voice. "You can issue a writ protecting me from her claims." "I can do better than that," Judge Morrison said. "I can issue an order for an investigation into her business practices, and I can ensure that any charges she has filed against you in Denver are dismissed for lack of evidence. It will take some time to work through the proper channels, but I give you my word, Miss Dalton, you will not be dragged back to Denver on false charges." Amelia felt tears of relief streaming down her face. Thank you so much." "Do not thank me yet," the judge said. "Those men out there, the ones who work for Madame Rousseau, they will go to jail for assault and attempted kidnapping. But Madame Rousseau herself is in Denver, outside my immediate jurisdiction. I can make legal trouble for her, but I cannot guarantee she will not send more men after you in the future." Finn spoke up, his voice firm despite the bandage on his arm. "Then Amelia will stay here in La Junta where I can protect her, at least until this is fully resolved. I am not letting her out of my sight until I know she is completely safe." Judge Morrison studied Finn for a long moment, and a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I can see that, young man. Very well. I will draw up the necessary papers tonight, and you can take them with you in the morning. In the meantime, the sheriff will keep those hired guns locked up, and you too should get some rest. You look like you have been through hell." They thanked the judge profusely and left the boarding house together. The sheriff had arranged rooms for them at the hotel, separate rooms out of propriety, but Finn walked Amelia to her door and lingered there, reluctant to leave her. "We did it," Amelia said, still hardly able to believe it. "We made it, Finn. You kept your promise." "I told you I would," he said, brushing a strand of hair back from her face with infinite gentleness. "And now I am going to keep all the other promises I made you. Tomorrow we will send word to your father that you are safe. And then, if you are still willing, we will start planning our future together." "I am more than willing," Amelia said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him softly. "I love you, Finn Calloway, and I cannot wait to spend the rest of my life showing you just how much." He kissed her back, deep and lingering, a kiss full of promise and hope and absolute devotion. When they finally parted, both were smiling, the kind of smiles that came from deep joy and relief, and the certainty that they had found something rare and precious. Amelia slept that night in a real bed for the first time in days, and she slept deeply and peacefully, knowing that Finn was just down the hall, keeping watch over her even in sleep. When she woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the window, and she could hear the sounds of the town coming to life outside. There was a knock on her door, and when she opened it, Finn was there, freshly shaved and smiling with a bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. "Good morning," he said. "I thought you might like these." Amelia took the flowers, touched by the simple sweetness of the gesture. "They are beautiful, thank you." "I went to see Judge Morrison this morning," Finn said. "He has drawn up all the papers, and he assured me that Madame Rousseau cannot legally touch you now. You are free, Amelia, truly free." The words settled over her like a benediction, and Amelia felt a weight she had been carrying for months finally lift from her shoulders. Free. She was free to go home, free to live her life without fear, free to love this incredible man who had fought so hard to protect her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I take you home to your father," Finn said. "And then I ask his permission to court you properly the way I promised. And if he says yes, which I very much hope he will, then we start building that future we talked about." They left La Junta later that morning with Judge Morrison's papers safely tucked in Finn's saddlebag, and the knowledge that Dutch and his men would be facing justice for their crimes. The ride back to Ordway took 4 days, but it felt completely different from the desperate flight south. They took their time, stopping to rest when they were tired, talking for hours about their hopes and dreams and plans. Finn told her about his childhood in Kansas, about his family and the farm where he grew up. Amelia shared stories about her mother, about the happy years before the illness, about her dreams of having a family of her own someday. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other with the kind of deep attention that comes from genuine love. When they finally rode into the yard of the Dalton farm, Thomas came running out of the house, his face a mixture of relief and joy. Amelia dismounted and threw herself into her father's arms, and they both cried openly, holding each other tight. "I was so worried," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "I did not know if I would ever see you again." "Finn kept me safe, Papa," Amelia said. "He kept his promise and he got me to Judge Morrison. Everything is settled now. I am free." Thomas turned to Finn, who had dismounted and stood respectfully back, giving them space for their reunion. "You brought my daughter home safe," Thomas said. "That is a debt I can never repay." "I did not do it for payment, sir," Finn replied. "I did it because it was right, and because somewhere along the way I fell in love with your daughter, which brings me to something I need to ask you." He stepped forward, removing his hat, and Amelia felt her heart begin to race. "Mr. Dalton, I know we have not known each other long, and I know I am not much to offer, just a cowboy with a horse and some skills as a tracker. But I love Amelia with everything I am, and I believe I can make her happy. I would like your permission to court her, with the intention of asking her to marry me when the time is right." Thomas looked between Finn and Amelia, seeing the love shining in both their faces, and his stern expression softened into a smile. "Son, you rode into danger to protect my daughter when you did not have to. You kept her safe and brought her home. As far as I am concerned, you have already proven yourself worthy. You have my permission and my blessing." Amelia let out a cry of joy and ran to Finn, throwing her arms around him. He caught her and spun her around, both of them laughing with pure happiness. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, not caring that her father was watching, and Amelia kissed him back with all the love in her heart. The months that followed were the happiest of Amelia's life. Finn found work on a ranch near Ordway, earning enough to save for their future while he courted Amelia with old-fashioned propriety. He came calling every Sunday after church, bringing her small gifts, ribbons and books, and once, a beautiful carved music box. They went on picnics by Big Sandy Creek and attended community dances in town. And slowly, Amelia watched Finn transform from a lonely, wandering cowboy into a man who was building roots and finding home. In November, as the first snow began to fall on the Colorado plains, Finn proposed officially. He took Amelia to the spot where they had camped on the first night of their journey, the bend in Big Sandy Creek where cottonwood trees grew thick. He had brought a blanket and a picnic basket, and after they ate, he knelt in the dry grass and pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "Amelia Dalton, you are the bravest, kindest, most beautiful woman I have ever known," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. You taught me that it is possible to love again, to hope again, to believe in a future that is not defined by loss. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you have made me?" "Yes," Amelia said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her with a passion that took her breath away. And Amelia knew with absolute certainty that this was her destiny, that every hard thing she had endured had led her to this moment, to this man, to this love that filled her whole heart. They were married in the small church in Ordway in January of 1883, on a cold, clear day when the snow sparkled like diamonds in the sunlight. Amelia wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit, and she carried a bouquet of dried wildflowers that Finn had preserved from their journey. Her father walked her down the aisle with pride shining in his eyes, and when Finn took her hand at the altar, Amelia felt like the luckiest woman in the world. The whole town came to the wedding, including the Martinez family, who had traveled from their ranch to celebrate. Rosa hugged Amelia tightly and whispered, "I knew from the moment I saw you two together that this was meant to be." The celebration afterward was simple but joyful, with music and dancing and a feast that the whole community had contributed to. Finn danced with Amelia for hours, holding her close and whispering promises against her hair, and Amelia felt like she was floating on air. They spent their wedding night in a small cottage that Finn had built on land adjacent to her father's farm. It was modest but sturdy, with a stone fireplace and windows that looked out over the plains. Finn carried Amelia over the threshold, both of them laughing, and he set her down gently in the main room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Calloway," he said, and Amelia loved the sound of her new name on his lips. "I am home," she agreed. "Wherever you are, that is home to me." They made love that night with tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies with reverent hands and whispered words of love. Finn was gentle and patient, making sure Amelia felt safe and cherished, and when they finally came together completely, it felt like the perfect culmination of everything they had been through. All the fear and danger and uncertainty transformed into this beautiful union. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, and Finn stroked her hair with infinite gentleness. "I love you," he murmured. "I will love you every day for the rest of my life, Amelia. That is my promise to you." "And I love you," she replied, pressing a kiss to his chest where she could feel his heart beating strong and steady. "Thank you for asking me to trust you. Thank you for keeping me safe and for showing me what real love feels like. You gave me everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know to hope for." The years that followed were full and rich and deeply happy. Finn continued working as a ranch hand, and he also took on tracking jobs when they were legal and just, using his skills to help people rather than hunt them. Amelia kept house and tended a garden, and she also started teaching reading to the children in Ordway, finding deep satisfaction in helping others learn. 2 years into their marriage, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. Finn was beside himself with joy and worry in equal measure, hovering over her constantly and driving her slightly mad with his overprotectiveness. But Amelia loved him for it, loved seeing this strong, capable man rendered helpless by his concern for her welfare. Their first child was born in the spring of 1885, a healthy baby boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Amelia's father, and when Finn held his son for the first time, Amelia saw tears streaming down his face. "I never thought I would have this," he whispered, staring down at the tiny, perfect infant in his arms. "A family, a home, this much happiness. I thought I had used up my chance at this kind of joy." "You deserve it," Amelia said softly, reaching up to cup his face. "You deserve all of this and more, Finn. You are a good man, and you are going to be an amazing father." And he was. Finn threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything else he cared about. He built toys for Thomas, taught him to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, told him stories about the Colorado plains and the importance of being honest and brave. Amelia's father lived to see his grandson born, and he spent his final years surrounded by the family he had feared he might lose. He passed peacefully in his sleep in 1887, and though Amelia grieved deeply, she was grateful he had lived long enough to see her happy and settled with a man who loved her. 3 years after Thomas was born, Amelia gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Grace, who had their mother's gentle spirit and their father's adventurous streak. The little cottage became too small for their growing family, so Finn built an addition, working late into the evenings to create bedrooms for their children and a bigger kitchen where Amelia could cook and preserve food. News occasionally reached them from Denver. Madame Rousseau's operation was eventually shut down by federal marshals after Judge Morrison's investigation uncovered evidence of human trafficking and corruption. The woman herself fled to California and was never heard from again. Amelia felt only relief at the news, grateful that other women would be spared the fate she had nearly suffered. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Finn surprised Amelia with a trip to Denver, the first time she had been back to the city since her escape. She was nervous at first, but Finn held her hand the entire time, and she realized that Denver no longer held power over her. She had built a new life, a better life, and the past could not touch her anymore. They visited museums and restaurants, and Finn bought her a beautiful silk shawl that she treasured for the rest of her life. But the best part of the trip was simply being together, walking the streets hand in hand, reminded of how far they had come and how much they had overcome. As the years passed, their love only deepened. They weathered droughts and hard winters, illnesses and financial struggles, but they weathered them together, their partnership strong and unshakable. Finn never lost his protective streak, still watching over Amelia like she was precious cargo, but he also learned to trust in her strength, to lean on her when he needed support. Amelia watched her children grow up strong and confident, raised by parents who loved them fiercely and taught them the value of honor and compassion. Thomas became a veterinarian, using his gentle hands and patient nature to care for animals throughout the region. Emma married a schoolteacher and moved to Colorado Springs, where she opened a school for girls. Grace stayed closer to home, marrying a rancher's son and settling on a spread just 20 miles from Ordway. When Finn and Amelia celebrated their 25th anniversary, they hosted a party that brought together friends and family from all over Colorado. The Martinez family came, now with children and grandchildren of their own, and there were neighbors and church friends and people whose lives Finn and Amelia had touched over the years. At one point during the celebration, Finn pulled Amelia aside, leading her out to the porch where they could look out over the land they had built their life on. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and Finn wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You remember that night by Big Sandy Creek?" he asked, "when I asked you to trust me one more time?" "I remember," Amelia said, leaning back into his embrace. "I was so scared, but I knew even then that you were someone I could believe in." "You took a chance on me," Finn said quietly, "a broken-down cowboy with more past than future. And you gave me everything I had lost and never thought I would find again. You gave me love and home and purpose. You saved me, Amelia, just as much as I saved you." Amelia turned in his arms, looking up at the face she had loved for so many years, still as handsome to her now as it had been that first day in her father's yard. "We saved each other," she corrected gently. "That is what love does. It saves us from loneliness and fear and the belief that we are not worthy of happiness. You showed me what real love looks like, Finn. Patient and brave and willing to sacrifice everything for the person you care about. That is the greatest gift anyone ever gave me." He kissed her as the sun sank below the horizon, a kiss that tasted of 25 years of shared life and promised 25 more. Around them, the sounds of celebration continued, their children and grandchildren and friends making merry. But in that moment, it was just the two of them, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of fear and loss. Years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as life inevitably does. They buried friends and celebrated births, weathered economic hardships and rejoiced in small victories. Through it all, Finn and Amelia remained each other's constant, the bedrock on which their family was built. In their later years, when Finn's hair had gone silver and Amelia's hands were marked by age, they would sit on their porch in the evenings and watch the sun set over the Colorado plains. They would hold hands and talk about their life together, remembering the wild ride from Ordway to La Junta. The moment Finn had stood up to those hired guns, the first time he had told her he loved her. "I would do it all again," Finn said one evening, his voice still strong despite his 70 years. "Every mile, every moment of fear, every risk, I would do it all again to have this life with you." "So would I," Amelia agreed, squeezing his hand. "Trusting you was the best decision I ever made. You gave me the love I deserved, Finn. The love I did not even know existed until I found it with you." They lived to see their children settled and happy, to hold great-grandchildren in their arms, and know that the love they had built together would continue through the generations. And when Finn passed quietly in his sleep at the age of 74, with Amelia holding his hand just as she had held it through so many adventures, she grieved deeply, but also felt profound gratitude. He had kept every promise he ever made to her. He had protected her, loved her, built a life with her that was rich and full and beautiful. And though her heart ached with his loss, she knew she had been blessed beyond measure to have loved and been loved by such a man. Amelia lived for 3 more years after Finn's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, telling stories about the cowboy who had asked her to trust him one more time, and had given her everything she had ever dreamed of and more. When she passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 75, her family buried her next to Finn in the small cemetery overlooking Big Sandy Creek, the place where their adventure had truly begun. On her headstone, her children had carved the words Finn had spoken to her so many years ago, "Trust me one more time." And beneath it, they added her response, "I did and found the love I deserved." Their story became legend in Ordway, told and retold by generations of families who remembered the cowboy and the woman he had saved, who had saved him right back. It was a story about courage and trust, and the transformative power of real love, the kind of love that asks for everything and gives even more in return. And on summer evenings, when the sun sets over the Colorado plains and the cottonwoods whisper in the breeze, people say you can still feel the echo of that love, strong and true and eternal. A reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin not with a plan, but with a simple act of faith in another person. That one moment of trust can change everything, can lead to a love that deserves to be remembered forever. The Dalton farm still stands today, now operated by the 5th generation of Finn and Amelia's descendants. They keep the original cottage as a historical site, showing visitors the simple rooms where two people who started as strangers built a family and a legacy. They tell the story of how a cowboy asked a frightened woman to trust him one more time, and how she did, finding not just safety but a love that transformed both their lives. In the main house, there hangs a portrait painted when Finn and Amelia were in their 50s, still vibrant and strong. In the painting, Finn's arm is around Amelia's shoulders, and they are both smiling with the kind of deep contentment that comes from a life well lived together. Their eyes are bright with love and the shared knowledge of all they had overcome to be together. And at the bottom of the frame, inscribed in careful letters, are the words that sum up their entire story. She trusted him one more time and found the love she deserved. It was a love built on courage and choice, on the willingness to believe in someone even when logic said not to, on the determination to fight for happiness even when the odds seemed impossible. It was a love that started with a desperate flight across the Colorado plains and grew into something that lasted a lifetime and beyond. That is the power of real love. It does not always come when or how we expect it. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a cowboy with a troubled past and a good heart, standing between you and danger, asking you to take a leap of faith. And sometimes, if you are brave enough to trust, to believe, to reach for what seems impossible, you find not just escape from your troubles but a partner who will stand beside you through every storm and celebrate every joy. Finn and Amelia's descendants still gather every year on the anniversary of their wedding, coming from all across Colorado and beyond to celebrate the love that started their family. They stand by the graves overlooking Big Sandy Creek, and they tell the stories, keeping the memory alive for new generations. They talk about the hired guns and the desperate ride to La Junta. They talk about Judge Morrison and the papers that set Amelia free. They talk about the simple wedding in the Ordway Church and the cottage Finn built with his own hands. They talk about 3 children who grew up knowing they were loved, about 25 anniversaries and 50 years of partnership, about 2 people who found each other against all odds and held on tight. But most of all, they talk about the moment of trust. That single instant when Amelia could have said no, could have chosen fear over faith, could have let her past dictate her future. Instead, she looked into the eyes of a cowboy she barely knew and decided to believe in him, to trust him one more time. And in doing so, she found exactly what she deserved. A love that was patient and kind and fierce. A love that protected and cherished and endured. A love that turned a frightened refugee into a beloved wife and mother, and eventually a great-grandmother who died knowing she had lived a life rich with meaning and joy. That is the legacy Finn and Amelia left behind. Not just children and grandchildren, not just the land they worked and the house they built, but the example of what it means to trust wisely, to love deeply, and to believe that even in the darkest moments, there is hope for something better. Their story reminds us that the Wild West was not just about gunfights and cattle drives and frontier justice. It was also about people finding each other in the vast emptiness of the plains, building connections that could withstand any hardship, creating families and communities that would endure for generations. And at the heart of it all was love. Real, honest, transformative love. The kind of love worth fighting for, worth running hundreds of miles for, worth risking everything to protect. The kind of love that asks you to trust one more time and rewards that trust with a lifetime of happiness. Finn Calloway and Amelia Dalton's love story became the foundation on which an entire family was built, a testament to the power of choosing hope over fear, faith over doubt, love over everything else. And though they have been gone for over a century now, their story lives on, inspiring each new generation to believe in the possibility of finding their own great love, their own moment of trust that changes everything. In the end, that is what we all hope for: to trust and be trusted, to love and be loved in return, to find that one person who sees us completely and chooses us anyway. Finn and Amelia found that in each other on the dusty plains of Colorado in 1882, and they held on to it with everything they had for the rest of their lives. And when Amelia's great-great-grandchildren stand by those graves overlooking Big Sandy Creek and hear the story of how it all began, they understand something profound: that real love is not about perfection or ease or having all the answers. It is about choosing to trust even when you are scared, choosing to believe even when you have been hurt before, choosing to reach for happiness even when the world seems determined to deny it to you. The cowboy asked her to trust him one more time. She did. And she found the love she deserved, a love that echoed through the generations and proved that sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply opening your heart and saying yes to the possibility of something beautiful. That is how legends are born. That is how love stories that last 100 years and more begin. With a choice, a leap of faith, and two hearts brave enough to believe that together they could face anything the world threw at them and come out stronger on the other side, Finn and Amelia did exactly that. And in doing so, they gave their descendants not just a family tree, but a map for how to love well, how to choose wisely, and how to build a life that matters. Their legacy was not measured in acres of land or material wealth, but in the love they shared, and the family they raised, and the example they set for everyone who came after. And that, more than anything else, is a legacy worth celebrating, worth remembering, worth passing down through the generations. Because in a world that can be harsh and unforgiving, stories like theirs remind us that love is possible, that trust can be rewarded, and that sometimes asking someone to believe in you one more time can lead to the greatest happiness either of you will ever know.